There is a drawer somewhere in every long life, a small one, lined with cedar, holding a single folded letter the years have made yellow at the edges. The hand that opens it, in lamplight, is older than the hand that first put it there.
Even in the dark, child, look for the light.
That was the whole of it. The line a grandmother had written for a girl who could not yet hear what it meant. The girl had grown into a woman who carried bricks in London in the cold rebuild year of 47.
Sir, the loading is reversed. You're reading the section from the back.
She had not said anything that loud in 3 years, and 40 men on a wet East End morning were about to learn what silence had been hiding. This is the story of Mary Ellsworth, of the scent of pine and promise, and of the afternoon the rain washed a guarded heart clean. London, the spring of 1947. At the corner of Stepney Green at dawn, with a wind still faintly of cordite even 2 years after the bombs stopped, you would have seen what the war had left behind. Whole terraces gone, streets ending in a sudden gape of sky. Brick dust in the gutters. The London County Council had begun the rebuild block by block. Scaffolding climbed against the pale gray sky. Braziers glowed low in the rubble, and there were people, ordinary people, carrying bricks. One of them was a woman of 26, slight in the shoulder, wiry in the arm. Light auburn hair pinned beneath a gray cloth cap. Mended gray-blue overalls a size too large. Hobnailed boots that had been her father's. A stub of carpenter's pencil tucked behind her right ear. Her name was Mary Ellsworth. 7 years before, in the autumn of 40, Mary had walked through the gate of the Bartlett with a leather portfolio under her arm. Second-year student. April of 42, her father, a Liverpool docker, killed by a stray bomb at Huskisson. Mary left the Bartlett in November to nurse her bed-bound mother. In the spring of 46, her grandmother Winifred died, 80 years old. The only person in her life who had ever told her plainly that she had a good eye and to keep using it. Winifred left her a folded letter. Mary kept it on a cord beneath her shirt. She had read it perhaps 100 times. She had not yet, in any meaningful sense, believed it. So in the spring of 47, Mary Ellsworth carried bricks for the LCC at Stepney Green, 12 bob a day, 6 days a week. She did not mention the Bartlett. She kept her head down. The site was half a terrace of 4-story housing along a road the bombs had taken in 41. Pine planks beside the scaffold, hod carriers like ants on a thread. In the office hut, the clerk, Hattie Pell, ran a ledger. 2 children at home, a husband buried at El Alamein. At the center of the yard, in a stained donkey jacket and a clay pipe, stood the foreman, Tommy Bracewell. 41, Birmingham bricklayer, barrel chest, a voice built for shouting. On Mary's 3rd morning, the wind shifted at break time and brought her something she had not been expecting. She was standing by the brazier, with her tin mug between her hands. The wind crossed the pine stack, and rain had fallen in the night, and the planks were dark with it. The resin, warmed by the brazier, rose into the cold air, and under it, coal smoke. pine and coal smoke. Mary closed her eyes, and she was 8 years old in her grandmother's joinery shed at Hawkhurst, the long board on the trestle, the soft yellow paper, the scent of pine offcuts. Her grandmother bending down with the wire spectacles low on her nose, putting the pencil into her hand, asking her to see that line, that load, that thing pushing down, and to draw what held it up. The memory was gone before it had arrived. Mary opened her eyes. Cecil Marlow had come to stand at the fire beside her.
All right, love. Keep that mug between your hands a minute longer. The wind off the river doesn't forgive thin sleeves this week, and you've been at this brazier 3 mornings now and eaten nothing I could see. It's Cecil, mind. Nobody's called me Mr. Marlow since the king was crowned, and I've nearly forgotten the man myself. There's a tin of biscuits in the back of the shelter, if Hattie hasn't done for them yet. Knock twice if you've a mind. I won't look. And listen, lass. 3 mornings is not so long. You've got the shoulders for it. You've got the eye, more important. And you keep that pencil behind your ear like a person who has been told what the pencil is for. Whoever taught you proper. I'll not ask. I'll only say, when the foreman starts up, you keep that pencil where it is. I've been on yards 30 years, lass. I've seen 4 good hands broken by 1 bad foreman, and I've seen the wall go up the wrong way after. And I have learned to know one sort from the other inside a week. You are the first sort. The hod is wrong for you. The wall isn't. You'll find your way.
Mary gave him the smallest smile she could manage. Cecil was 58, tall and bent from 30 years of brick. A gray mustache yellowed by pipe smoke, fingerless wool gloves. He had watched her all 3 days with a patience that asked nothing. The patience was about to be tested. From the far end of the site, the foreman's voice rose.
Oi! You with the question. Yes, you, lad. If you've got the mouth to ask it, you've got the legs to find out yourself. Round the back with the others. Move, and you. Brickstack. What's your name again? Ellsworth. Right. Got plenty of words in you, have you? No matter. Get to it. We don't pay for standing about. Backs, not jaws. That's the rule on my yard.
A young laborer of perhaps 18 ducked his head and went. Tommy turned, hands on his hips, taking the morning's measure of the yard. His eyes found Mary at the brazier and held a beat longer than was kind. Mary kept her eyes on her boots and said only, "Level," that her name was Ellsworth, sir, and that she had enough for the work. Tommy Bracewell had spent his life learning to read a man's silence. He read Mary's, that morning, as weakness. He was wrong, but it was the kind of wrong a man like Tommy could not yet imagine being. He bellowed for the bricklayers to take their places, and did not look back.
Don't let him plant the flag, love. He needs the planting more than the flag. Keep your head down for the hod. Don't keep it down for the man. Different muscles, that. Remember which is which, and you'll outlast him.
Cecil, the scent off those planks just now took me back to my grandmother's joinery shed at Hawkhurst. 8 years old in the doorway, her hand on the small of my back. I have not stood in that shed in 18 years. Does a scent do that to you, ever? Pull you clean through a door you thought you had locked?
Cecil, working on, said quietly that it did every working day of his life. Pipe smoke, his father's pipe. You never lock the door, love. You just stop looking. The scent opens it by itself. Mary set down her tin mug. She picked up her hod. She walked back to the stack. And under her cap, very faintly, she touched the cord at her throat with the back of her wrist, the way another woman might cross herself. The day ran out, the way the days had been running out. Hods filled, hods carried, hods emptied, mortar mixed, brick set, the light dropping by half hours behind the chimneys. At 6 o'clock, the whistle blew. Mary collected her wages from Hattie at the office hut window.
12 bob. Same Friday. You eat tonight, love. You're thin as a lath. And keep Mr. Bracewell's measure off your shoulders on the way out. Some men are weather. You don't argue with weather. You put a coat on.
Mary walked back to her rented room above the baker's on Cable Street. Mrs. Hollis, sweeping the doorway, pressed a slice of yesterday's currant loaf into her hand as she did every Wednesday. Mary climbed the stairs. She lit the small oil lamp, washed her hands twice, the brick dust running gray. On the washstand, a single framed photograph. Her father, in his docker's cap, taken at Liverpool in 1939, his arm around her mother, and at her mother's elbow Mary at 15, squinting in the sun. She looked at it the way she did most evenings, then untied the cord at her throat, unfolded the letter on the coverlet, and let her eyes rest on the page. The paper was cream. The ink slightly bled at the downstrokes, the corner softly worn from a year of folding. She did not read aloud. She let her eyes go to the line near the end. Even in the dark, child, look for the light. Mary Ellsworth, 26 years old, sat on the edge of a narrow bed in a rented room above a baker's on Cable Street in the spring of 1947, with the lamplight on her hands and brick dust still under her thumbnails, and did not weep. She had not wept since the funeral. She had been told by an aunt at the wake that weeping was a thing women had to ration like everything else that year. She had rationed. She folded the letter back along its creases. She tied the cord around her throat. She unwrapped the slice of currant loaf Mrs. Hollis had pressed into her hand and ate it slowly, looking at the lamp. She put the crumbs into a saucer for the sparrows on the sill. She turned the lamp down low. She lay down, and somewhere beneath her ribs, where she had not been letting herself feel it, a small thing moved. She did not name it. She did not give it permission. She only let it be there, the way you let a moth be there at the window, knowing it will be gone by morning, knowing it might not. 3 more days went by at Stepney Green. The hods, the mortar, the brick, the wind off the river. Mary kept her head down, lifted what she was told to lift, listened as she had always listened. And in the listening, she heard things she did not say. On the 2nd day, at the trestle inside the muster shelter, Tommy was holding forth to a knot of new laborers about a drawing pinned at the corner. Tommy, at the pinned drawing, told them it was a stretcher bond, and the number on the side was the Was the sit-up, the soffit, whatever. Point being, you don't argue, you just lay to it. Mary did not look up. The word was soffit. The number was a hatter height. She had read it the day before in the lunch break. Cecil caught the twitch at the corner of her mouth and, later at the mortar tub, murmured to her that soffit was a word, just not the word Tommy had wanted. The way her eye had flicked was a reading. The bricks knew who was reading them. It was the first time in 3 days anyone had spoken to her, as though her silence held an answer. That evening, after the whistle, Mary did not leave at once. She told Hattie she had dropped her pencil somewhere by the trestle and would just look. Hattie raised an eyebrow, but waved her on. Inside the muster shelter, the lantern was already lit against the dusk. The blueprint was pinned flat. Mary stood at the trestle alone. She lifted her finger and laid the tip of it on the inked line of a beam at the front elevation. Her lips moved. She was reading the load.
Span 4 meters. Point load at center. Dead load plus live. Half of WL/4. 7.5 times the safety factor for green timber. 11.25. The bond list has it at 9. The bond list is wrong. You were right, Nan. The work does speak. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it. I'm very quiet now.
She drew the calculation in the air with her fingertip above the linen. The numbers settled in her head as cleanly as they had ever done in the drafting room at the Bartlett, 7 years and a different country ago. A footstep at the doorway. Mary pulled her hand back as if from a stove. Hattie stood there with the ledger under her arm. She looked at Mary, looked at the drawing, looked at Mary again, and asked, mildly, then sharper, if the pencil was found. Yes, of course it was. Behind the ear all along. Now, the number Mary had her finger on. The bearing reaction. Was it right? Speak plain. There was nobody listening but the lantern and her. And the lantern did not gossip. Mary, very quiet, careful, finding voice, said it was right, Mrs. Pell. The bond list read it the other way. She thought the bond list was wrong. Half WL/4 with the safety factor for green timber gave 11.25, not 9. The lintel beneath had been laid for 9. If anyone put a piano in the front room of number 4, they would hear it talking before the year was out.
Don't be sorry, love. Be useful. I'll cross-check the bond list Monday morning before Mr. Bracewell is in. Quietly. There is a way of running a council office, Mary, and it isn't the loud way. It is the right page, the right column, the right pencil mark in the right margin, and when the clerk who wrote the wrong number sees the correction, she will know, and the foreman who lays brick by the wrong number will know, and the LCC will know, and nobody on this yard will have heard a single voice raised about any of it. That is my work. Yours is to lock the shelter when you go, walk home down Cable Street, sleep if you can, and stand at that brick stack tomorrow and let nothing show, not a flicker, not a glance at the drawing on the wall. Can you do that for me, Miss Ellsworth? Just until Monday.
Mary said, almost a breath, that she could. She had done nothing else for 3 years. Hattie crossed the yard back to the office hut. On Monday morning, she ran her finger down the bond list and the requisition slip, stopped at the 3rd entry, and made a small penciled question mark in the margin of her own ledger. Mary's reading had been right. The next morning, before the muster, Mary found a small folded note in her wages envelope, in Hattie's clerk's hand. Shelter unlocked at 6. Tilly lamp by the back trestle. H. And Mary tucked it behind the letter at her throat. That evening, after the whistle, the side door was unlocked, the lantern full of paraffin, the framing drawing for the second floor on the back trestle. Mary stood there 40 minutes, read beam by beam, found near the south corner a second detail called out wrong on the requisition, and made a careful note in the back of her carpenter's notebook. Outside in the dusk, Cecil Marlow had stopped on his way home. Hattie was at the office door. Cecil asked Hattie for a word. The lass at the brick stack caught what the foreman missed. He had not seen a hand like hers since before the war. Hattie said she had noticed and had a Monday cross-check ready. She could not put the lass's name on it yet. Cecil said he minded. He had a granddaughter her age, and walked on. The next morning the rain held off. By 10, the brickwork on the west wall had advanced 3 courses. Tommy walked the length with his pipe between his teeth and stopped at a section Mary had hod-fed an hour before.
Who laid this? Eh? Whose stretchers are these? Speak up, lads. Doesn't matter who laid it then. Question is, who fed it? Who fed this stack? Eh? Step up. I've not got all morning and the cement isn't waiting on a coy answer. Whoever it was, step up now and own it before I have to send round the gang to find you. We don't hide behind a hod on my yard. Step up. Now.
Mary stepped forward, kept her chin level, and said quietly that she had. She had fed the course that morning, the one from 6 to 7, and the one after, off the south side stack.
You did. You did. Right, lads. Gather round. Free lesson for the day, on the house, since the apprentice rates are what they are this year. You see this course here? Stretchers, all in a row, neat as you like. Now what does the drawing say? Drawing on the wall, 10 feet from where we stand. Anyone with a pair of eyes can walk over there and look. Drawing says headers every 4th course. Headers, not stretchers. Headers. So what's this? This is what happens, lads, when you let a hand on the line who reads what looks nice instead of what the drawing tells her. This is what happens when you let in the soft sort, the ones who think a pencil behind the ear makes them an engineer. You've been to school, have you, love? Read the drawing, did you? Or did you just hod what looked nice? Eh? No answer? That's right. That's the right answer. Yes, Mr. Bracewell. There you are, lads. That's how we learn on this yard. Mouth shut, ears open, head down. That, lads, is the foreman's prayer, written nowhere and known to everyone, with the sense the good Lord gave a pigeon. Get back to it. The light is not getting any longer this side of June. The wall is not going up by itself. And the next hand I catch reading what looks nice will be off this site by tea time. Move.
A small laugh went up from 1 or 2 of the newer laborers. The others kept their eyes on their boots. Mary's mouth opened. She had the answer in her teeth. The drawing, pinned not 10 feet from where they stood, called for an English bond at this elevation. alternating whole courses of stretchers with whole courses of headers, not headers every fourth. She had read it that morning at the lantern, with her fingertip on the linen, the way a child reads scripture. She had the answer. She did not give it. She lowered her head and said only, quietly, "Yes, Mr. Bracewell." He walked off, pleased. The crew dispersed. Mary stood a moment, her hands flat against her thighs, then turned to fetch the next hod. Cecil Marlow waited until Tommy was at the far gate, then set his trowel down, walked to the section, looked at the course, looked at the drawing, looked at the course again, and without a word began to take the next layer up as a header course exactly as Mary would have laid it. He did not look at her. The brick said what he was not going to. The morning was not finished with Mary. Tommy came back through the yard at 10:30 and stopped at the mortar tub.
How's the schoolgirl then? Hot heavy enough for you today? Or shall I send for a smaller one? Wouldn't want a Bartlett girl with a sore shoulder, would we, lads? Wouldn't want her writing home to her tutor about the working conditions on a council yard, eh? Maybe she could draw us a nicer hod, with handles, with a pretty little bow on the strap.
He had not, until that moment, known the word Bartlett had any meaning. Jacob had not yet returned to the site. The word had come from the back of his own head, where he kept the names of things that bothered him. Mary's hand on the hod went white at the knuckle. A laborer laughed uncertainly. Cecil set a brick down with a small, deliberate click. Mary, eyes down, said quietly the hod was right, Mr. Bracewell, and she would take the next when the mortar had been turned. Cecil told Tom the mortar was setting up, mind the south batch. Tommy dropped his voice. When he wanted a lesson from Marlow, he would ask, "Don't get clever." Cecil did not answer. He laid a brick, tapped it level. The silence after his trowel was longer than the silence before. Tommy walked off toward the gate. Will from Cardiff carried the loaded hod to the wall himself.
Some men learn by hearing themselves talk. Most don't. The mortar talks, the bricks talk, the level talks. A man with a good ear could spend a working life listening and never run out of teachers. Tom hasn't got the ear. He'll learn another way, or he won't. Either way, the wall goes up to the line. Listen, lass. You go and sit at the back of the brick stack a minute. Eat your sandwich. The work doesn't care about a minute. The work cares about the line, and the line is where you put it. 1:30 tomorrow, you'll have forgotten this morning. 6 months from now, you'll have forgotten the year. 20 years from now, there'll be a child in the upstairs window of this terrace who will not know your name and will know your work all the same. The wall above number 4, with the lintel taking compression, that will be your wall, lass. Mine will be the courses I laid for it. The foreman who shouted in your face this morning will be a man in a public bar in Bermondsey. Nobody asks for an opinion anymore. That's the only kind of forgetting that means a thing. The rest is weather. Go on. Sandwich.
At noon the drizzle began. Light, slow, the kind of rain a Londoner barely notices. The crew ducked under the half-built terrace for their sandwiches. Mary went the other way, to the back of the brick stack, where a sheet of tarpaulin had been pegged out as a shelter. She sat down on a low stack with her back against the canvas. She took her sandwich from her overall pocket. She did not eat it. She untied the cord at her throat. She brought out the letter. She had not opened it on sight before. Something in the drizzle, something in the smell of the wet pine, something in the small public defeat at the bricks, said open it. She did. She unfolded it carefully on her knee. Her eyes went to the paragraph above the line she knew by heart.
My dear girl, when I was 19, your great-grandfather sat me down at the long table at Hawkhurst and said, plain as he could, that women did not read drawings. A drawing was a man's language. A wife could keep the books and the kitchen. A daughter could hem the curtains. But a drawing was not for her. I was 19, child, and angry. But I did not yet know that anger was a tool. So that night, after he had gone to bed, I lit a candle in the joinery shed. I took down the drawing of the cabinet he had been arguing over for a week, with the dovetailed cornice that would not sit true. I sat on the cold floor in my nightdress and read it through 3 times. By the second cockcrow I had found the error. He had drawn the cornice from the wrong face. The dovetail was reversed. In the morning, I left the drawing on the table with my pencil mark beside it. He came down. He looked at me. And he said, quite quietly, well then. After that day, child, he never told me a drawing was not for me. And so, my dear girl, if a loud man stands between you and your eye, you do not need to shout him down. You only need to read truer than he does, and to wait for the morning when the work itself will speak.
Mary's hand tightened on the edge of the paper. The drizzle pattered above her on the tarpaulin. Wet pine drifted up from the stack, that same resin note. She closed her eyes and held the letter against her chest. The drizzle above her went on. By 1:45, the drizzle had become a real shower. The crew sheltered in the half-built terrace. Mary folded the letter, tied the cord, walked to the shell of the terrace, stopped in the doorway. Inside, the men were laughing at something Tommy had said. The brazier was a low orange smear behind the rain. The scent rose, pine and coal smoke, sharper in the wet. She almost spoke. The shape of a sentence began at the back of her throat. Tommy's laugh broke it. She stepped back, stood under the eave of the office hut where she could not be seen until the rain eased. Patty, inside, kept her eyes on her ledger, marked a number neatly, did not say a word. At 2:30, with the rain easing to a soft mist, a man in a brown tweed jacket stepped up to the office hut window and asked for the foreman. Tall, lean in the shoulder. Dark hair combed back, a strand fallen forward. Hazel eyes. A faint scar across his left eyebrow, the pale thread of an old shrapnel hit. An army-issue canvas satchel, a roll of drawings under his arm. Hattie, efficient, slid the requisition pad across, asked for name and reason. The council had tightened up on sign-in chits in March. The visitor gave his name as Coleridge, Jacob Coleridge, consulting engineer for the LCC, with a drawing for the foreman and a survey to walk. Hattie's pencil paused at the name. She looked at him over the rim of her spectacles, wrote the name, stamped the chit, slid it back, and told him level, that Mr. Bracewell was at the west wall and to mind his boots on the planks. He stepped down from the office hut, stepped into the yard. He looked once around the site, the way a soldier still looks at a new room. The half-built terrace, the scaffold, the brazier with its slow steam, the line of laborers at the brick stack. He began to walk. Mary Ellsworth was bending to lift her hod when his shadow fell across the bricks. She did not look up at first. A foreman's shadow, a clerk's shadow, a laborer's shadow. They had all crossed her hod 100 times. She set the strap to her shoulder. She straightened, and she saw him. For a moment, her face did not move at all. It went, instead, very still, the way a pond goes still when the wind has been thinking about it and then decides to leave it alone. Her lips parted. Her hand, which had just settled on the strap, did not let go. He had stopped, 3 paces from her, with the satchel against his hip and the roll of drawings in his hand. The strand of dark hair had fallen forward across his brow again. He had not yet said anything. He was looking at her, the way a man looks at a face he has carried in his head for years and is suddenly required to admit is real.
Elle?
The nickname. Nobody had called her Elle in 7 years. Nobody on this site, in this city, in this whole rebuild year, had any business knowing it. It was a draughting room nickname, a Bartlett nickname, a nickname for a girl with a portfolio under her arm in the autumn of 1940. Mary's mouth opened. No sound came. She set the hod down, very slowly, on the boards.
Jacob.
Around them, the yard had gone quieter than it ought to have done. Cecil, at his course, had stopped tapping. A young laborer at the mortar tub had paused with the shovel half lifted. Hattie, at the office window, had laid her pencil down. And at the west wall, with his pipe between his teeth, Tommy Bracewell had turned, slowly, to see what had quieted his yard. He saw a stranger in a brown tweed jacket standing 3 paces from his brick stack laborer. He saw the laborer with her hod set down at her feet. He saw the stranger's face. He saw the laborer's face. He saw, in the half-second it takes a foreman to read a yard, that this stranger knew this woman, and not as a woman who carried bricks. Tommy took the pipe out of his teeth. His thumb worked, once, against the bowl. He did not move. Jacob Coleridge, 27 years old, lately of the Royal Engineers and now of the London County Council, took one more step toward the woman he had not seen since the December of 1941. He stopped. He found, for the first time since the war, that he did not know what to say next. And Mary Ellsworth, 26 years old, brick carrier on the Stepney Green rebuild, with her cap pulled low and her grandmother's letter against her skin, and the smell of pine and coal smoke rising off the wet stack behind her, looked at him. She did not yet look away. They did not say much that first afternoon. Jacob had a survey to walk. Mary had hods to carry. Tommy, who had decided in a single heartbeat to file the moment away, gave Jacob a curt nod and a tour of the west wall, and Jacob, with the steadiness of a man who has commanded sappers under fire, made small, careful talk about brick coursing and bearing courses and did not, once, look toward the brick stack. But the yard had seen. The yard, that strange, small parish that knows its own gossip before the kettle has boiled, had seen. Cecil set his trowel down at 3:45, and said to no one in particular that there were things in this life a man did not need explained. Hattie ran her ledger and her pencil and her stamp pad, and at 4:30 she made a small unnecessary note in the margin of her daybook. At 6 the whistle blew. Mary collected her wages. She turned out the gate, and Jacob was waiting on the pavement with his satchel over his shoulder and the strand of dark hair already fallen forward across his brow. Jacob, quiet and careful, asked her to walk a bit. He would not press her. He had an hour before the last train back to Greenwich, and would rather spend it walking with her than sitting alone in the office hut. East along the Rubble, slow as she liked. He was sorry about her father, he said. He had heard only later. Had tried to write. The letter had never reached her. Her mother. Her grandmother. Nan. He was very sorry for all of it. They walked east along the Rubble Street toward Limehouse, past the gutted terraces and the chimney stacks standing alone. He did not ask why she was a laborer. She did not explain. The quiet between them did not need breaking. Mary, low then with more force, said she had never got the letter. Mother had gone the last winter. Quietly, she was tired. Nan, in the spring of 46. Thank you, Jacob. And what about you? She had thought. She had heard he was lost. 44. France. There had been a notice in the Times in the September of that year. She had cut it out. She still had it in a tin under the bed at Cable Street. Was he telling her that she had been carrying a notice of his death in a tin for 3 years, while he had been walking about on this island the whole while? Jacob, with a small half-laugh, said he had come close. A piece of shell, this eyebrow. A week in a Belgian farmhouse with a very patient nun. The unit had listed him missing before the runner found him. By the time the correction was filed, the Times had already gone to print. He had come back, got demobbed in October, finished the degree, taken the county council consultancy in February, and he had been meaning since the day he signed the contract to find her. 7 sights already this spring. Then cautiously, he asked if she still drew. The Bartlett had taken 2 back from his year. There was talk of more in the autumn. If a name went forward.
Only in my head, Jacob. Only ever in my head, for 7 years now. I read every drawing pinned in the muster shelter on every Sunday morning when the yard is empty. I calculate every bearing reaction. I find every wrong number in the bond list. I do it on the back page of my own notebook in pencil, and I close the notebook again. The reading still happens. The swallowing is the work. Don't. Not yet. I am not ready to be asked. I left the Bartlett in the November of 42. I sat by my mother's bed for 14 months. I buried my father in absence, my mother in person, my grandmother in the spring of 46. I have carried bricks for nearly 3 years, 12 bob a day, 6 days a week. I am not the girl with the portfolio you knew at the Bartlett. I am a woman in mended overalls with a stub of pencil behind her ear and a folded letter on a cord beneath her shirt. If you put my name on a piece of paper now, the paper will burn through and the name will burn with it. I might be ready one day. Not today. Wait for me. Will you wait?
I'll wait, Elle, as long as it takes. I have a patient nun's worth of practice at waiting now, and nowhere else I would rather be. Listen, I have been carrying you in my head for 7 years. Through Sandhurst, through the unit in Hampshire, through Normandy and the Ardennes, through the Belgian farmhouse, through the D-Mob office in Aldershot, through every drawing I have inked for the council since February. You have been the second eye on every section I have signed off. The night before I send a drawing up the chain, I lay it on the kitchen table at Greenwich, and I imagine you bending over it with the pencil behind your ear. And I look for what you would catch that I have missed. I have caught 2 errors that way this spring. 2 lintels and a stair tread. I did not know you were 3 miles east, on a brick stack at Stepney Green. I would not have asked you today, if I had thought it through. I was startled. I am sorry. You will be ready, Elle, when you are ready. Not before. Not because I or anyone else asks. Until then I would like, if you will let me, to walk you home on Thursdays. No paper, no council, no talk of the Bartlett. Just the Rubble. Just an hour. Will you let me?
He did not press her. He nodded once, slowly, the way a man nods at a private promise. They walked on. He left her at the corner of Cable Street with no plan made. She climbed the stairs, lit the small oil lamp, did not untie the cord at her throat, lay on the coverlet with her hands folded over the letter, and did not sleep until very late. Tommy Bracewell, that same night, did not sleep well either. He sat in the public bar of the 10 Bells with a pint going flat and the clay pipe cold between his teeth. He had heard the stranger call her Elle. He had seen the look she had given. The comfortable idea he had carried of Mary Ellsworth had cracked. Men who cannot bear the cracking of a comfortable idea will, very often, reach for the hammer. By closing time he had a plan, a foreman's plan, a trestle, a fresh drawing, 40 men, and a woman whose silence he intended to crack in public before the stranger set foot on his site again. He did not know the stranger would arrive the next morning before he had called the muster. 8 o'clock. Jacob crossed the yard to the office hut, signed in, laid drawings on Hattie's counter, tipped his cap to Cecil. He did not look toward the brick stack. Mary did not look toward him. A careful agreement in the not looking. Tommy came out with a freshly unrolled blueprint, clapped his hands once very loud, and called the muster to the trestle. 40 men drifted in. Cecil came at his own pace. Hattie came to the office doorway with her arms folded. Jacob paused on the office step. Tommy laid the drawing flat, with a flourish, weighted the corners and did not. Anyone paying attention would have noticed. Look at the orientation marks. He launched into his lesson, parading. Today's lesson, lads, reading a structural drawing. There was no Bartlett girl reading, only the correct reading, which was his. Miss Ellsworth, front please. The crew shifted. Mary walked forward with her hands behind her back, stopped at the corner of the trestle, kept her chin level, looked at the drawing. And in the half-second her eyes touched the linen. Before Tommy had even begun, she saw it. The drawing was face down. The linen had been unrolled from the reverse face. The orientation arrow pointed the wrong way. The requisition stamp was mirrored. The load arrows at the lintel pointed upward instead of downward. The whole section was being read inside out. It was the kind of mistake a Bartlett tutor would catch in a first-year student inside 10 seconds, and the kind of foreman who had never read a working drawing in his life would not catch at all. Mary's mouth did not move. Her hands, behind her back, did. Tommy jabbed his pipe at the linen and declared what they were looking at was the lintel detail, the bit over the window, and the arrows were the loads coming up, which told Miss Ellsworth that the lintel was taking tension. She had been laying the course beneath as if it were taking compression, which was what he had been trying to teach her for a fortnight. And that, lads, was what happened when you let people on a site who thought a pencil behind the ear made them an engineer. A scatter of nervous laughs. Most of the crew did not laugh. Cecil's pipe had stopped moving an inch from his mouth. Jacob, on the office step, had taken a single step forward. Hattie, in the doorway, had unfolded her arms. And then the cloud that had been hanging low all morning broke open. The rain came down in a single great rush, hit the corrugated tin like a snare drum struck flat-handed, darkened the pine planks course by course, hissed off the brazier. A curl of steam drifted in on the cold air, pine and coal smoke, sharper in the wet. Mary, at the corner of the trestle, breathed in. And she was 8 years old, in her grandmother's joinery shed at Hawkhurst, the long board on the trestle, the yellow paper, the pencil being put into her hand. She was 19 at the Bartlett, with a tutor leaning over her shoulder. Good L, a good clean section. She was 20 in the kitchen at Hawkhurst, her grandmother passing her a mug of tea, saying, "Child, the world will tell you to put your eye away. You will not put your eye away." She was 26, in a muster shelter at Stepney Green, with a foreman's pipe stabbing at a drawing that had been read inside out. Her hands, behind her back, unclenched. She took one step forward. She brought her right hand out from behind her back. She laid the tip of her index finger, very lightly, on the linen at the center of the lintel detail.
Sir, the loading is reversed.
Tommy stopped mid-sentence. The crew who had been shuffling went still. The rain on the tin overhead was the only sound. Tommy's mouth opened. Nothing came out of it.
You're reading the section from the back of the linen. The orientation arrow at the bottom right is pointing the wrong way. The requisition stamp at the bottom left is mirrored. You can see the letters are reversed. And the load arrows here at the lintel, on the correct face, point downward, not upward. The lintel takes compression, not tension. The course beneath it has been laid correctly all week. If you would turn the linen over, Mr. Bracewell, you will see.
40 men did not move. The rain on the tin, the brazier hissing on, out in the yard. Cecil Marlow, who had been standing 2 paces behind the trestle, stepped forward without a word. He set his pipe in his jacket pocket. He laid his weathered hands on the iron weights, one at a time, and lifted them off the corners. He took the linen carefully by its 2 upper edges, and he turned it over. On the correct face, the orientation arrow pointed cleanly to the north of the elevation. The requisition stamp at the bottom left read clearly, ink against linen, in letters that ran left to right. The load arrows along the lintel pointed downward, as Mary had said. Cecil set the linen flat. He nodded once. He did not look at Tommy.
Lass is right.
Hattie Pell crossed the yard with her ledger under her arm, set it on the trestle, turned 3 pages, put her fingertip on the requisition line, and said clearly the requisition number, LCC/574/A, dated the 11th of April, signed off by Mr. Coleridge, stamped by her office on the 12th. Reading off the stamp, now it ran left to right, as it should. The drawing had been unrolled the wrong way round. Mr. Bracewell. The young lady had read it correctly. She would be noting that, with respect, on the day's running sheet. Tommy Bracewell, 41 years old, foreman of the Stepney Green rebuild, stood with his clay pipe in his right hand and his left hand flat on the corner of the trestle. He looked at the drawing. He looked at Cecil. He looked at Hattie. He looked, finally, at Mary. His mouth opened. Nothing came out of it. He had been preparing to find a great many things in his mouth that morning. He found none of them in there now. From the office step, Jacob Coleridge spoke, very quietly, in a voice not raised above the rain on the tin.
She's right.
From the back of the crew, somebody coughed, a careful clearing of a throat. It was Albert, the bricklayer Tommy had picked the quarrel with on the stretcher course days before. He took a half step forward and said, gruff and plain, that Miss Ellsworth had been calling the courses right all fortnight, that the lads had noticed that she had put him on the right header on Tuesday by a flick of her eye when he had misread the chalk, and that a working crew notices the work. Mary nodded once at him and did not, even now, speak. Albert nodded back. Nobody moved. Mary's finger was still on the linen. The rain on the tin overhead was the only sound. Then Cecil took his trowel out of his belt and tapped the handle once, gently, against the iron weight. The bricklayer's small sound that lets a yard know the work has been corrected and will now go on. The crew began to look at their boots. None looked at Tommy. Tommy stood at his trestle alone, looked once at the empty linen, set his pipe in his pocket, and walked the length of the yard toward the gate. He did not look back. Mary did not watch him go. She brought her hand back and laid both palms flat on the bare trestle, breathing the way a person breathes who has set down a thing too heavy to carry. Jacob came down off the step and waited at the far end. Cecil came back and stood at the third corner, Hattie at the fourth, the 4 of them around the empty trestle, the rain easing to a soft patter, the scent of pine and coal smoke drifting in on the cold air. Mary lifted her head and looked across at Jacob. Her eyes were wet. She gave him the smallest nod. Jacob nodded back. Cecil tipped his cap. Hattie laid the rolled drawing on the corner of the trestle, then leaned across and spoke, very low, only for Mary.
Listen to me, love. What you did just now. I've been waiting 10 years to see it on a yard and never once seen it. Not once, Mary. I have watched 7 foremen swing a drawing the wrong way round in front of 7 crews, and I have watched 7 crews say nothing and go back to laying it wrong, because there was no woman with a finger to put on the line. You did it level. You did it without raising your voice. You did it with the drawing on the table, and the men in the room, and the foreman's pipe in his hand and the rain on the tin, and you did it as though it were the most natural thing in the world to do. You will think tonight you only said 1 sentence. You said a great deal more than that. You said it for every clerk's office in every borough of this city. You said it for the women who carried bricks before you, and for the women who will carry drawings after you. You said it for me. Now you sit a minute, Miss Ellsworth. You breathe. The world will keep until you are ready for it, and I will keep the rest of the yard from crowding you while you wait.
Out in the yard, the brazier hissed once more under a last fat drop. Then the rain stopped. And that scent, pine and coal smoke, the same one that had been with Mary since her 3rd morning on this site, the one that opened the door to her grandmother's joinery shed at Hawkhurst, rose one more time on the cold air. Only this time, it did not return her to the shed at Hawkhurst. This time, it stayed exactly where it was, in a half-built terrace at Stepney Green, on a Wednesday morning in the spring of 1947, beside a trestle where a drawing had just been read true. The rest of the day went on the way it had to. By 6, the yard emptied. Mary stayed in the empty yard, alone with the half-built terrace and the low embers. The scent rose one more time, pine and coal smoke, the same that had carried her that morning into a sentence she had been saving for 7 years. She took the stub of carpenter's pencil from behind her ear. Hattie came up behind her with the rolled drawing and a small tin pencil cup. She set the drawing on the trestle, unrolled it correct face up, found the small printed box at the corner marked *Corrector, and said only quietly that Mary should sign for the correction, that it was procedure. Mary looked at her. Hattie looked back. There was no need, between them, for anything else. Mary stepped to the trestle, took up the freshly sharpened pencil Hattie offered, bent over the linen, and in the small printed box marked Corrector, in clear, careful draughtsman's hand, wrote her full name, Mary Ellsworth, *. The ink took to the linen cleanly. The capital M was steady. She set the pencil back, straightened, put her own worn stub back behind her right ear, and said quietly to the empty air, "There, Nan," that she had signed it, that Nan would have liked the box, small and plain and honest as a level. She had thought it would feel bigger. It felt smaller, one true line on a piece of linen, which was, she supposed, exactly what a beginning was. Hattie, with a small smile, said she would file it tonight. It would go to the LCC with the weekly return, and it was Hattie. Mine had been for a fortnight. Mary just hadn't been listening. She rolled the drawing up correct face out, walked back across the yard. The office lamp came on a moment later. Mary stood by the cooling brazier a long minute and felt, beneath her ribs, a thing that was almost peace. She walked home along Cable Street, lit the small oil lamp, sat on the edge of the bed, untied the cord, unfolded the letter, and said, almost a prayer, to her grandmother that she was going to read it through tonight. The whole letter. She had earned it. The work had spoken through her, the way Nan had said it would. Read it with me, she said. I want you in the room. She let her eyes go to the final paragraph.
My dear girl, I have written you the long story of how a woman comes by her voice. Now I will write the one thing I most want you to hear. There will be a morning when a loud man stands between you and your good eye, and your mouth will be full of the answer, and your throat too small for it. On that morning, remember, the work itself, if you let it, will speak louder than you can, even in the dark, child. Look for the light, not as comfort against the dark, as instruction. Be the light, child, that the women coming behind you will need to read by. I will not be there to see the morning you become it, but I have seen, in the shape of your hand at 6 years old over the offcut of pine, that you already are. With all my love, Nan.
Mary read the line over. Once for her grandmother, once for herself. Once, very quietly, for the women she did not yet know who would come behind her on sights she had not yet walked. She folded the letter, tied the cord at her throat, turned the lamp low, and lay down. And this time, she slept. The next morning was the kind of clean spring morning England gives now and then in April. Mary came in at the gate at 5 to 8. At the office hut door, she found Jacob Coleridge waiting with 2 enamel mugs of tea and a small rolled drawing tucked under his arm.
T, L, and a small one. Stair detail, off the back terrace. Wanted a second eye on it, if you can take it. No hurry.
Mary thanked him, lifted but steady, said she could take it. Friday. She tucked it under her arm the way she had seen her grandmother do. Jacob nodded once and walked off. Cecil tipped his cap as he passed and said the yard was hers this morning. Hattie said Friday for the drawing. Tommy Bracewell was not on the site. He had asked before 7 for a transfer to Bermondsey. He was not destroyed, only relieved of a stage he had not earned. By autumn, on Hattie's recommendation and Jacob's signature, Mary had been written back into the Bartlett. She finished her degree 2 summers later and did not, that whole long while, take the pencil stub from behind her right ear. In the spring of 48, 1 year on, the Stepney Green terrace was finished. On a Saturday morning, Mary walked back to the corner where the brazier had been. The yard was paved over. Above her, white sheets and a small yellow child's dress lifted in the wind. Hattie Pell came across the paving and called her name. Good house, chimneys pulled clean. The young families had hung their washing as though they meant to stay. The council would want 6 more by autumn. Mary should come to the office Monday. Mary turned with a small smile, said she was glad and Monday would suit. Hattie waved and went on. Mary put her hand to the cord at her throat. Mary said it aloud to the empty street, clearly and steady. Even in the dark, child, look for the light. Mary stood at the corner a little longer. A young woman of perhaps 19 had stepped out of the second front door with a basket of wet washing on her hip and a peg in her teeth. She had the look of a girl who had been told too many times what she could not do. She gave Mary a small nod. Mary spoke before she had decided to.
Miss, may I tell you a thing? I carried bricks on this corner for 3 years. I was a drowning student at the Bartlett before the war made other plans for me and for everybody else, and I gave it up to nurse a mother who is no longer here to nurse. The lintel above your window was laid to a number I read on a drawing in the lamplight after the whistle had gone, when nobody was looking and nobody had thought to ask. The clerk at the office, Hattie, ran the cross-check on a Monday morning and put her pencil mark in the right margin, and the wall went up to the right number, and the chimney above your kitchen pulls clean because of it. The work always knows, miss. The bricks know. The drawing knows. The morning will come, perhaps several mornings, when somebody loud will stand between you and your good eye and tell you that you cannot read a thing you have already read truer than him. On that morning, I would like you to remember 3 things. You do not need to shout him down. You only need to put one finger on the line, to read it level, and to wait. The work will speak through you. I promise you it will. Even in the dark, child, look for the light. My grandmother wrote that to me in a letter I have kept against my skin for a year, and I think she wrote it for you as much as for me, and for the woman who comes after you in the next door of this terrace, and for every woman who is right now standing at a brick stack on a council yard in this city and not yet saying the thing she knows. I am Miss Ellsworth. I draw for the council now. If you ever want to read a drawing, you come round the office in Whitechapel and you ask for me. Bring your peg. I will teach you. I will teach your sister. I will teach your daughter. I have been waiting 18 years to be asked.
The young woman stared and took the peg from her teeth. Mary nodded once and walked on toward the bus stop. There are, in closing, certain small graces a long life teaches you to recognize. The grace of being seen. The grace of a scent that turns out to have been a door. The grace of a grandmother's letter that becomes instruction instead of comfort. And the largest grace of the women who carried bricks because no one yet thought to ask what else they might carry. If this story found you at the right moment, share it with someone who is still carrying bricks. You can find more stories like this one at the porch light. We will be here with the lamp on.